Buddy, I'm Mental Love here. I made a little video earlier and I'm gonna share it now. It was a long video and there were two topics. So this is about different consciousnesses that may be residing within our body, influencing us, and how we can deal with that. And I think I just want to add on to what I spoke about in the video and say that, you know, maybe the purpose of meditation is to strengthen our own consciousness so that it can overpower all other consciousnesses. So go ahead, enjoy the video. I love you and I hope you get something out of this. Peace. So this Dhamma talk I've listened to 1.5 times. I'm going to listen to it a couple more. It's by Ajaan and Thanissaro Bhikkhu is reading it. So he's reading his book and it talks about consciousnesses. So talks about, you know, how we kind of sabotage our lives. So have you ever had a situation? I know I have one right now. Well, maybe not right now. Maybe it's over. We'll see. But I have for several months had a situation where my mind keeps getting drawn in and triggered to a certain train of thought and sucking me into fear and depression and anxiety and jealousy even. And this, you know, just this one thing, when I hear it, it's been triggering me. Not every time when I hear it, only certain times when I hear it. It's really interesting, right? So I'm not going to tell you what it is, but for the rest of the time, most of the time I'm pretty good. You know, I do have other issues, but they're different issues. So when we live our lives and we get pulled in and hooked and triggered, upset, even when we get incredibly happy, you gotta think about, why is that? Is it just neurosynaptic connections? Is it just our brain being wired in a certain way? Oh, there's my timer. Is it just our brain being wired in a certain way? Or is there something more happening? Now, this talk from Thanissaro Bhikkhu, reading Ajaan Lee's book, talks about consciousness. It says when we come into the womb, that is a pure consciousness. So in order to enter the womb, only one consciousness can enter the womb. And it has to fight off other consciousness. So maybe not fight off, but other consciousness, they're not as strong. And so we're able to make it into a human womb. And then other consciousnesses start associating with us. So think about it. If you had your consciousness, and if we can be reborn into different bodies, again and again, reincarnation, they say, or maybe into different types of bodies. So maybe into an animal body, maybe we can be spirits, just ghosts, maybe we can be devas or angels, who knows, maybe we can even be trees, I don't know. so there must be, or there could be, lots of different consciousnesses floating around. I mean, I've experienced feeling people, feeling consciousnesses. They're not people anymore, but you know, my relatives that have passed, I can feel them when I think of them, and when I talk about them. So who's to say that, you know, there are not other consciousnesses that we're not aware of around us all the time? So what he talks about is that microbes, bacteria, viruses in our bodies, worms, we have, you know, worms in our bodies, hopefully not, but you know, a lot of times parasites and worms in our bodies. I mean, if this body has a consciousness, if its mind has a consciousness, who's to say that, you know, the bacteria in our bodies don't have a consciousness also? They must, because they're a living being, right? So there has to be some sort of consciousness in order to be a living being. And so if if that's the case, so what he says is, there's our pure consciousness, our pure awareness that's totally free, that's totally happy, peaceful, doesn't need or want anything. And then there's all these other consciousnesses that have different karma. So they may be angry consciousnesses. They may be, dejected and sad consciousnesses. They may be consciousness that wants to accrue merits, and they don't have any way of doing it from where they are. And the human body is the best place to accrue merits, to do good deeds and learn wholesome things, to become peaceful. The Buddha says this is the only place you can become enlightened, in the human realm. So, sorry if I made you yawn, by the way. So, what Ajaan Lee is saying in his book is that other consciousnesses are residing within our bodies, and there are three types of consciousness. There's our pure consciousness, which is actually it's not even an identity. It's not us, but it kind of is. There's no actual personality there. There's just pure awareness, pure peace. I believe. I have to listen to it again and look deeper into this, guys, because it's just mind-blowing. And then there's other consciousness. There's consciousnesses that have a body. So there's worms, viruses, bacteria that live within our bodies. I mean, we're made up of bacteria. So there's, trillions of bacteria with all individual consciousnesses within our body, sharing this body. Wow, right? You think about it that way, it's like, wow. And then there's things like spirits and ghosts that also can reside in our body. And I've had experience with releasing an energy that, before it was released, I had unconscious thinking, and it just wouldn't stop. But then once the energy was released, the thinking was gone. That train of thought was gone and never came back again. Really amazing, really strong. So there are entities, energies, at least, consciousnesses, conscious beings that live within our bodies and use our bodies as a host and can influence us. So when we have a thought, it's not necessarily our thought. It could be the thought of one of these infinite consciousnesses, infinitudes of consciousnesses within our body. So it could be bacteria having a thought, wanting something. It could be the worm that's, could be a hungry ghost or a spirit within us that's thinking the thought. And what he's saying is that don't associate with fools. So guard your senses. So when you see, it's just seeing. When you taste, it's just tasting. There are infinite bacteria in your mouth, millions, tasting. And so when you have a desire for a certain taste, it could be a consciousness that wants that taste. It sounds crazy, right? But it could be. I mean, our bodies are, if you think that the body is a single self, or it's kind of quite delusional for us to think that way, because it's made up of trillions of bacteria and viruses, right? And if they're alive, they must have some sort of consciousness. So these bacteria and viruses and worms could be having their own thoughts. Why not? Why do you think you have to have a brain to have a thought? Now, people have had out-of-body experiences and seen things and been aware. I mean, maybe the brain, or maybe, the nervous system of the organism or whatever, any form that it communicates in, as long as there's the ability to communicate, and organisms all have the ability to communicate and act and move, consume. If they have that ability, then why don't they have the ability to think? And if there are beings within us, entities, consciousnesses within us that are thinking also, who's to say that we're not going along with that train of thought? And who's to say that we're not getting fooled by that train of thought and thinking that is us? Because that we're aware and there's another consciousness that is also aware, that is thinking. And who's to say that those thoughts are our own thoughts, right? Remembering that our consciousness is the pure one, that it's the one that that is perfectly peaceful. And not that we should identify with that either. Sorry, it's super early. I haven't drank enough water, so give me a second. Grains makes everything better. So just consider, when you have an unconscious thought, you have repetitive thoughts. It could just be neurosynaptic connections, but man, that's really challenging to overcome. To think that you have to rewire your brain, I mean, that's empowering also, but maybe there's an easier shortcut to being free. If you consider maybe it's some other consciousness within me that's having these thoughts, and maybe I can just let it go because it's not who I am. It's not self. The Buddha teaches anatta, which is not self. It says consciousness is not self. Mental fabrication, so thoughts, images, is not self. Perception, so liking and disliking, the way you perceive things is not self. The body is not self. Feeling is not self. These are the 5 aggregates. So if we take this and we really run with it, I think we can be a lot more free. I think if we allow ourselves to realize that our thoughts are not who I am, and it's not just this sort of esoteric kind of idea. Maybe it's really real. Maybe the thoughts really are not coming from us. Maybe they're coming from someone else. So maybe they're coming from some other consciousness within us. So be open to the idea that this is possible. It doesn't need to be spooky or scary, but the possibility and the probability is that these bacteria, viruses, just because they're small doesn't mean that their thoughts are less powerful, right? Who's to say? Maybe they're just as powerful as our own. So we can watch our thoughts, watch our experience, watch our reactions, and say, you know what? That's not how I want to feel. Nobody wants to feel upset. Nobody wants to feel sad and depressed. Nobody wants to feel angry. So if that's the case, why don't we just let it go and say, that's not myself. That may be another consciousness. It's not who I am. And really kind of, choose an identity to overcome all other identities. So choose the identity that says who I really am is completely peaceful all the time, cannot be triggered, cannot be upset, cannot be saddened, cannot be angry, cannot hold grievances, cannot be jealous, and think the only I am, the only self is the completely peaceful and enlightened, perfect self. And if we allow that idea, then we can let all other selves go. Maybe they're not who we are anyways. Maybe it's another consciousness. And maybe we can say that consciousness that has arisen, at least, that we're aware of, is not who I am, and it's leading me into a destructive path. It's leading me towards unwholesomeness. It's leading me towards hatred, delusion, anger, jealousy, greed, fear. And we don't want to feel that way. When we're conscious, when we're actually thinking about what we really like to be like, we're thinking we'd like to be peaceful, we'd like to be happy, we'd like to be settled and enlightened. So choose who you want to associate. Don't associate with fools. Don't associate with these unconscious consciousnesses. At least, maybe they're not unconscious. Maybe they're not unconscious to themselves, but to us they are. And so we can say, I don't want to associate with fools. I'm only going to associate with peace, and I'm going to let everything else go. So really interesting, mind-blowing. I'm going to post the talk below if you want to listen to it. It's just mind-blowing. So I hope you've gotten something out of this. I know I said 10 minutes, but here I am at 20. I love you. Have a great day.